Welcome to the Eternal Vedic Science video 2022, The Seed of Transformation. What will we experience in the next months? When will the pandemics end? What do Vedic Indian astrologers say about the future? What is going to happen with the economic crisis? If God exists, why do we face so many problems? In today's class, we are going to answer all these questions and talk about the astrological year. According to the majority of astrologers, 2022 will be a year of learning, changes, alternating periods of movements and stagnation, adventures and drama, strong reactions, agitation, decisions, feedback, urgencies, and new opportunities. A lucky year for some, and at the same time, difficulties, political disagreements, and natural disasters. We ask all of you to remember, according to the Vedic manuscripts, which is the origin of astrology and other sciences of humanity, 2022 starts in April, when the sun will be in Aries, the astrological sign of fire and ignition. Therefore, our 2021 predictions class, still not available in English, will be valid until April 2022. Although there are still many social agitations worldwide, 2022, from April to May, will be a lighter year than 2020 and 2021, as related to the strange transforming conjuncture we are passing through. As we explained previously, the sun and the moon are sources of energy and blessings of the infinite. Solar and lunar eclipses, though, have a negative impact on societies, and we should avoid being exposed to them while occurring. The shadow of the last solar eclipse in Antarctica might cause calamities, because total solar eclipses can promote catastrophic consequences to the earthly plane. During the solar eclipse of December 4th, 2021, a sacred Indonesian volcano called Sumeru erupted. Right after that, a violent tornado occurred in North America, affecting 5 states during the wintertime, which is something very rare. The Western calendar was established by Pope Gregory XIII, who, even though had an illegitimate son, was considered an exemplary pope. Pope Gregory had a strong necessity for independence, a critical quality for one who was going to reformulate the Western time and calendar. However, that brought a lot of confusion and errors to Western astrology, as the new Western calendar has delayed the astrological signs by 15 days already, while the Vedic astrology, based on lunar phases, is way more precise. The Western astrologers say that 2022 will be a Mercury year. However, according to the Vedic astrologers, 2022 will be a year of Saturn. How do the Vedic astrologers calculate that? To calculate such thing, it is necessary to know the regent planet of the first new moon day when the sun is in Aries. That planet will be the 2022 regent. For example, Monday is ruled by the moon. In 2022, the new moon in Aries will occur on a Saturday, April 30th, the day of Saturn. Saturn's years are considered difficult years. This indicates that madness and suffering will continue, as well as wars and political conflicts. However, a good position of Jupiter after April will attenuate the difficulties related to Saturn, as we will describe soon today. Considering the month of the Western calendar New Year, we will talk about some facts that happened last January 2022. As you all have experienced, in January we have had many misunderstandings among people, physical delays, problems with electronic devices and internet connections. In February, we still had problems related to internet connections, social medias, as well as misunderstandings and miscommunication among people. Our words sounded distorted and unclear. Therefore, this was an important moment of the year to rethink our values and projects or finish what we have almost done so far. When Mercury is retrograde, it is good to recover things that we have left behind and to understand details that we have not understood before. It is time to slow down and get energy for the next steps. February also brought international conflicts, especially between the Western and Eastern countries. Besides Russia, China, India, and Pakistan may also act belligerently against other countries after this period. February was also a good period for creativity, individual planning, and romantic love. But watch out! Superficiality is a bad characteristic of Mercury. We need to be careful with this tendency. Superficial relationships weaken our emotion capacity. We need to be consistent and responsible because love always needs maturity and stability. The sense of solidarity will increase in 2022 according to individual consciousness levels. Attention! Each one will understand solidarity according to his own mind. Many people have no patience to listen to the full classes, but the knowledge is present in the details. A philosopher, an astrologer, are detectives to unravel facts that help increase our perception and awareness of everything around us. So those who really want to understand these predictions have to evaluate each word and small nuances to be able to decode the future. Without patience, there is no place for wisdom. As we understand, in the next years, we will have many problems that will lead us to extraordinary changes. March and April 2022 seem to be fire months, in which we will receive the malefic effects of the last solar eclipse in December 2021, as we previously mentioned. There will be an increase of government control and pressure over populations worldwide, especially related to sanitation and economics. Simultaneously, some societies will accelerate the development of virtual economics and money use, including the use of bitcoins and crypto coins, especially in China. For those who don't know, crypto coins have no governmental control, and their values are related to market value. One important alert: although virtual money looks very attractive and lucrative, especially to the young population, this does not mean that the governments will not control it in the near future. Look at the historical progression of money over time. We've gone from gold to silver, to copper, to nickel, to paper money, to check paper, to a plastic card, to electronic payment, and then we are going to a symbolic money value that will have no ballast. Also, what can it happen with virtual money during an internet connection crash or socio-economic crisis? In the future, a possible control and regulation of crypto coins by the government can limit their speculation, leading us to a complete virtual economy. In the next years, after an eclipse in Taurus that affects economics, combined with the transit of Jupiter in Aquarius, which recalls technological innovation, we will soon experience a great economic revolution. This indicates an expansion of virtual economics and the use of virtual money such as crypto coins. This will be a source of wealth for many, depending on their individual karma, as well as financial and economic trickery. Some of you could ask, is this a prediction of gaining wealth or of economical fraud? This is the central point of astrology. Please try to understand that no one or nothing can solve our life problems. Astrology shows us which kind of obstacles and easiness we will find in our lives. When we do our astral chart with a trustworthy astrologer, we can understand which kind of tests we will pass through during our lives, how we could avoid them when possible, or what is the path of good fortune. Depending on personal karma, some people can easily earn more virtual money than others. Related to pandemics, the majority of astrologists indicate a last and less mortal wave happening probably between March and April. This last wave can last longer. However, it will probably lead us to a new direction and to a solution for the disease. The new restrictive measures related to the virus will bring fear and anxiety, even and especially in almost full vaccinated countries. Some astrologists affirm that the Omicron virus signs the end of the pandemics, which will be reduced to non-lethal variants by the end of 2022. In our previous class, we had said that the final crisis would start at the end of 2021. The Vedic calculation indicates the beginning of the end of the pandemic crisis for April or May 2022. Therefore, from the second semester of 2022 to April 2023, we might move towards a general improvement. However, other astrologers are more pessimistic. Unfortunately, the pandemic's emergency has been very lucrative for a few. Pharmaceutical industries insist to use the despair and weakness of the populations to sell uncertain and unsafe drugs to control the virus, causing great prejudice to governments and populations. We are not only mentioning experimental therapies, but also the use of heavy drugs worldwide for diseases that could be healed by naturopathy treatments. One thing is to not allow non-vaccinated people to enter into public or private spaces for sanitation and safety purposes. Another thing is to obligate people to take medications that will affect their health and free will. Watch out. We can also mention the relation between TV and internet programs with the use of drugs and other illicit substances by pseudo-heroes and young characters to obtain superpowers and reach higher spiritual levels. But we know well that narcotics fake real mystic experiences, which can be obtained only through the pure devotional service to God. Pay attention. According to the Bhagavad Gita, we can learn how to control the senses through the regular practice of Ekadasi Vedic fasting and Mahamantra chanting, as well as being in direct contact with a self-realized devotee, with our own devotion and discipline. In this way, we will finally be able to find real balance and live in peace without any narcotics or other illusory substances. Before starting the good news, we need to explain that, although we try to separate events and astrological predictions year by year, the cosmos is a perfect symphony with a continuous movement. Therefore, we need to learn that there is no beginning, middle, and end for the movements of the planets. It is both fluid and multiple. The eclipse's effects on Earth can last for months or even years, alternatively. Just like when we plant a tree to have its fruits after years. In the material level, all things take time and have multiple consequences. Therefore, we must try to meditate on future predictions, to think about them. Were we able to listen to them adequately in the past? People get disappointed with the astrologer if he says things that do not happen exactly in that form. However, if the astrologer predicts most of the future events with accuracy, we should be satisfied, shouldn't we? Who can predict the future with full details and clarity other than God? Man is driven by the astral Wi-Fi, by the remote control of stars and planets. The chemical composition of the planets and stars generates electromagnetic radiation that affects the natural elements and human body, as we explain in the class The Power of Astrology. Our group, Eternal Vedic Science, studies philosophy, astrology, and science, comparing these studies with the reality to understand the meaning of existence. Our activities include astral chart consultations, book translations, and charity, both in Brazil and India. When the astrologer predicts a difficult relationship between a father and his son, this will not always be recognized by the person being analyzed. Sometimes this indication needs to be adjusted. For example, a person might not fight with his father, but if the same person does not support teachers and authoritarian figures, who are the father's archetypes, we have to understand the prediction in that sense. Astrology is not a magazine that tells us the chapters of a TV show, but a method of trying to decipher the karma and God's desire. We need to learn how to listen to the predictions rather than criticize them. A year is like a harvest of karma. In 2022, we will deal with questions on communications, thoughts, intellect, and deep understanding. It will be an intense year because of the influence of planets accelerating our activities and time perception. The theory of relativity is written in the Vedic literature, and this theory explains that time and space are interconnected. Time has different orbits and changes according to space, without the direct perception of the humans. We explain this in the class Sacred Geometry and the Forms of the Infinite. It is scientifically proven that time is faster in the mountains than at the level of the sea. You all can research it. This projection continues, the velocity of time, going up through the cosmos until an invisible star called Brahmalok, the first star of the material reality, which is connected to all dimensions of time and space in the cosmos. It's incredible, but according to modern science, because of the difference between time acceleration in the mountains and at the level of the sea, if twins were separated during their lives, one living at the beach and another one in the mountains, the one who lives at the sea level will look younger than the one who lives in the mountains. Therefore, India is considered the first philosophical civilization, as it brings concepts of time and space before Western researches. The real zero meridian is in the Himalayas, in which our connection with the sun is established, because the Himalayas are the highest mountains. The good news is that in April 2022, the gigantic and beneficial Jupiter will enter Pisces. Jupiter is the planet with greatest mass and density in our solar system. It is linked to the hypothalamus gland, located in the brain, which there is a body's control center responsible for the production of the hormone of compassion and affection. This hormone is also related to well-being and generosity. It is called oxytocin, and it is one of the happiness neurotransmitters. This hormone has the function of increasing well-being reducing stress, and improving depressive conditions. Jupiter, or Guru in Sanskrit, is the Jiva Karaka, the planet that represents living beings and humanity in general. Between the years 2019 and 2021, Jupiter went through great afflictions, first under the influence of the Sun, then Saturn, Mars, and the south node of the Moon, which is called Ketu in Sanskrit. An eclipse visible in Asia and Australia on December 26, 2019, negatively affected Jupiter. This fact triggered the beginning of the COVID pandemics and changes in the social structure on Earth. Afflictions to Jupiter continued in 2020 and 2021 as it crossed the constellation of Capricorn, Jupiter's maximum weakness point. After that, the planet moved through Aquarius, where he will be until April 22nd, 2022. Capricorn and Aquarius are the two malefic constellations for Jupiter, which consequently afflicts living beings. The meeting of Jupiter and Saturn in Capricorn is something remarkable, as it is the longest meeting in the zodiac, and both are the slowest planets in our system. Capricorn represents social structures, and the meeting between the positive master and the planets that charge us karma, Saturn, in that sign, brings profound changes that influence an entire generation and extend over time. The good news regarding Jupiter is that he will finally enter his domicile sign of Pisces on April 13th, 2022. Overall, this transit will mark an improvement in the global picture in some countries and regions. So, 2022 will be divided between a strong beneficial influence, Jupiter, and the heavy energy of Saturn. So, we will have a mixed year of reliefs and problems. Due to Saturn's influence, it could be a year marked by the presence of wicked men, thieves, and wars, with deaths linked to civil conflicts and epidemics. Under Jupiter's blessings, there will be prosperity in the harvests from the first half of April to September or October, but poor results from October to April 2023. So, it might be good to store grain in the first half of the sidereal year, as food prices will rise. In some places, there will be prosperity, and in others, scarcity and fear. In Brazil, there can be social conflicts over the results of the elections. However, according to the Vedas, a country without a president or without an elected leader falls into violence. It is not safe to predict an outcome now, but in the name of the economy and the social peace, it will be necessary to support the winner, whoever it will be. The stability of democracy lies in the mutual support between the party that wins and the party that remains in the opposition. Anyone can research this fact by reading books of Western politics. Pisces is a zone of the cosmos that is in tune with Jupiter, and it distributes the good effects that Jupiter provides. In Sanskrit, Jupiter is called Guru, as he brings the blessings of knowledge, prosperity, and healing. So we understand from that we might be going towards the end of the crisis. In the class about 2021 predictions and Kali Yuga, we said that the crisis would end between March and April 2022. And in fact, we are feeling much more relieved than in March 2020, at the beginning of the lockdown. We have to keep in mind that life does not work like magic, and that we need to see transformations in motion. We repeat, anyone who wants to understand the future needs to learn how to listen. Well, we said that Jupiter in Pisces will be something very beneficial. So many areas will improve. We will feel a desire for some relief, a desire for breadth, for opening up horizons. Things that are stuck in our lives will flow more easily from that point on. This does not mean that all the problems will end, but those who have Jupiter well positioned in their natal chart will feel much better. The crossing of Jupiter through the constellations of Pisces and Aries. Imagine a field of stars where the cosmic guru feels welcome and glorified. Will make 2022 lighter and underline the possibility of discovering something that we could not see before. For peace, the solution always comes from Jupiter, which is the archetype of a pure spiritual master, a figure that it's so rare to find these days. We will be hungry for knowledge, mainly spiritual, or even astrological knowledge. Human beings will want to integrate material and spiritual knowledge. From a cultural point of view, it will be an interdisciplinary year. There will be a need for being more universal and not be restricted just to one goal or to one type of knowledge. From that period on, science will need more philosophy. Different scientific areas will look at each other and exchange information. Many will enter through the door of simplification and blind optimism, but those who seek more ethical and balanced reform are more likely to advance towards Krishna. The significant technological advance of the next few years will germinate in 2022. Science will progress towards ether, which means it will deal with the space structure. We will walk towards the experiences of Nikola Tesla, who was a scholar of the Vedas, a little capricious and undisciplined from the philosophical point of view, though. He understood the electromagnetic emanation of the cosmos in a more visionary way than other scientists did. Despite having become a vegetarian in his last year of life, it is not correct to consider Nikola Tesla as the great prophet that the media wants to transform him into. After all, he declared that the soul is nothing more than the sum of body functioning, and when the body ceases, the soul also ends. And this is not correct. The soul is eternal. Regarding science, again the question comes, will scientific advances be good or bad? Unfortunately, science and technology have been used in a manipulative way, and so this will bring both good and bad. The understanding of time and the future allow us to use the good things to help us in our evolution towards the infinite. The upside will be the use of clean energy, such as solar and wind energy, from simple and traditional windmills, which will prove very useful in the area of eco-villages and rural communities. My advice is to invest in that too. We're not talking about the expensive and shippable propellers of giant windmills, which are also anti-ecological, but the old wooden windmills with their simple mechanisms used by rural populations, or the use of clean energy linked to water and the sea. But this does not mean we will completely leave on oil, gasoline aside, as this depends on humanity's choices. We have to be very careful with nuclear energy because as everything has pros and cons, it's good to remember the downside of nuclear energy is devastating. As nuclear incidents are shown in films about the future, we should avoid that. We have already said in other classes that Hollywood sometimes seems to be mass brainwashing, which prepares people to accept the madness that is imposed on humanity, and not just a field for the activities of writers and artists. On the other hand, the sun, the wind, the ocean, and water are powerful energy sources to give us enough energy we need. Remember though, that being afraid, panicking, or being anxious doesn't help us at all. Fear and anxiety are traps of the mind, and only have a positive side if through them we can avoid some evil. Paralysis and anguish block our ability to seek solutions and more awareness. As Krishna says, the problem's solution is always in the reflection of that problem. In other words, it's our opportunity to evaluate it. Even in writing, in a pros and cons chart, all the actions that we could take in the face of the impasse and its results. Those who use their intelligence always get good answers. God uses both the positive and the negative aspects of reality to teach us. We just have to be afraid of our ignorant actions, because they are what bring us suffering through the law of karma. Anyone feeling anxious can use pranayams to restore inner peace and the Mahamantra Hare Krishna. The material universe, as we have already explained previously, is a clock of stars, while the original personality of God, Krishna, is the sun of spiritual mercy. God is a wonderful astrologer who uses positive and negative mechanisms to teach us how to see the difference between bad and good, good and better, better and perfect, perfect and beyond perfect. If we dedicate ourselves to learning the lessons imparted by the true sages, we will always be advancing in our wisdom. You may have already noticed that we are in a circular loop of a roller coaster, walking through the Kali Era tunnel of turmoil. This moment looks like the same time as the beginning of the 20th century, which only stabilized around the 1950s. The beginning of the last century marked the end of the so-called Belle Epoque. It went through one turning point after another until the late 1940s, were the foundations for what we are living nowadays. And this seems to be a secret. The centuries begin, but only after the first decades of fermentation and changes in reality. It will be clearly characterized as the new one, with new inputs and new themes. Nowadays, exactly like people at the beginning of the 20th century, we are engaged in discussions of politics, gender, women's rights, diseases, and wars. But what is the most impressive is the spell that certain propaganda can use on certain people. The great wars still hide a lot of mystery and played with the human mind like an illusionist on the stage, as we will understand better in the next classes. Every illusion can be attractive to those who lose the parameters of reality. But we must remember that mysteries exist to be unraveled. We will talk more about this in the next class, in which we are going to discuss the future of humanity. Talking about hypnosis, and this is one more secret that the Vedas reveal, hypnosis depends more on sound than on image. From the 1920s, we saw the propagation of a new kind of popular music called jazz, which means speed, enthusiasm, agitation, noise, and even disorder. In the 21st century, sound, voice, communication, verbal expression will gain prominence. It is possible that new technologies on audio and music will emerge, and from that, a new social network linked to a different way of expressing our thoughts will also appear. We will witness a successive increase in podcasts. But attention, please. There is a big difference between accumulating information and attaining eternal knowledge. From 2022, we will be heading accelerated times, which makes our lives easier, but also generate impatience and arrogance. The advance of technology makes everything faster. However, the man will be less patient and less humble. We must be careful and pay attention to the human omnipotence delusion. When we reflect on the Vedic manuscripts, on life in the golden, silver, and bronze ages, we understand man feels more satisfaction from simple habits, such as observing fire and sitting in front of it, talking to his loved ones after dinner, working in the land, engaging in some kind of craft or art, praying in front of the altar, or reciting mantras. All of these pleasures have become increasingly difficult to have, being transformed by the use of machines and virtual devices. With regard to society, groups and collectivities, we will experience a desire for greater organizations. We will feel an urge to face social problems. As described in the Vedas, Saturn, a slow planet in the solar system, is the cosmic personality that changes our karma in life. As we know, Shanidev in Sanskrit passes like a steamroller over everyone and immediately demands payment for things we have done in past lives. In the coming years, and this will start in 2022, we will feel a very strong desire for freedom. We will be able to see popular agitation and new government proposals. The role of monarchies will change, as we have announced on other occasions, and literally, kings and queens will be able to leave their thrones or die. And, as always in Kali Yuga, England will play a central role with the presence of the royal family in numerous audiovisual productions. And the future will explain there is no coincidence. The future will explain that it's all programmed. Between March and April 2022, it is possible that movements in favor of freedom may emerge, and that can lead to violence. We must be very careful with aggressive behaviors. Aggression is something very sad, because balance never arises from violence. The Battle of Kurukshetra, described in the Mahabharata, the holy book that contains the dialogue of the Bhagavad Gita, can never be compared to quarrels, riots, and the wars of our time. The presence of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of the Absolute, at the Battle of Kurukshetra proves that one side of that war was absolutely right. However, nowadays, who can say they are absolutely right? Are they not fighting for their own interests? Or they are not being partisan or acting in an ideological way against this or that? Or do they have full knowledge about all the factors involved in determining what is the most perfect justice? No human being can perform such accomplishment. Therefore, we must respect the original rule of the Vedas, which speaks of ahimsa, non-violence, and this should be the first principle of spiritual life. Arjuna's struggle cannot compare with the disarmaments and fights of the present moment. Be careful. I don't know if you realize it, but the context of movies and series on internet has inflamed the relationship among different groups in the name of freedom. Don't be fooled by that. Human against human is more a trap than a solution. Mediumship, psychism, fanaticism, allied to the massive, acute, and invisible presence of fake news, will be intensified on public opinion. Man will be conducted to collective madness that will only be revealed with time by those who reach the platform of knowledge free from personal interests. We have explained this in the other classes on the YouTube channel. Mercury's influence, which will get even stronger in 2023, can intensify the wave of manipulation of scientific advancement and society as a whole. This tends to increase cheating. Space and the idea of colonization of other worlds and the cosmos will also increasingly become the stage for disputes, a war of political ideologies and social competition. This fact will be much more related to fantasy and propaganda than to factual reality, as we explain in the class called Labyrinths of the Matrix. We are inside a movie. What comes to us through the media is extremely manipulated and falsified. The era of fake news tends to become more and more the empire of half-truths. 2023 will be a year of strong presence of frauds and scams via internet and cell phones, as Mercury will promote trickery. Fake news with real-life problems such as tsunamis, earthquakes, and floods will continue to push the population along the line of divide et impera, divide and rule, creating more and more anxiety and dispute between the subgroups. Man against woman, black against white, Western versus Eastern, homo against straight, left against right, rich against poor, young versus old, student against teacher, employee against boss, children against parents, whether you don't want to get a vaccine against the ones who want to take it, people who believe in the pandemics versus people who claim it never existed. Probably in the future, the moment we are passing through with all these divisions will end up splitting public opinion and society into two parts or more groups. This will cause a real disaster. Without realizing all these temporary aspects of reality, no one will overcome the stage of history. The soul has no sex, no color. In one life we are yellow, in the others we are born black, white, hybrids, human, animals, vegetables, rich or poor. It all depends on the lesson we need to learn. God changes our position in reality so that we can understand more about who He is. In a cosmos regulated by karma as a result of past actions, everyone can lose what they have and gain what they want. We are all born young and can reach old age if we are lucky enough to do that. So therefore, this competition is not always enlightened. It's quite the opposite. It can endanger our lives. Instead of competing, we have to learn to collaborate with each other. The correct objective is to harmonize all our differences and integrate society respecting the different types of karma. Everyone has blessings and hardships, good and bad traits, easier or harder goals. It is like that for everyone. It's also important to remember, in the course of life, sometimes what seemed to be good becomes an impediment, and what seemed to be unfavorable becomes the greater advantage. So we need to learn how to see things. In the future, we will also talk about and see robots and clones, real and fake. Many people will be interested in this kind of subject for both human and animal clones. But not all of this will be true. Some people will claim to be clones of themselves, which make us laugh as the lack of ethics the characters of our era are developing. And there are those who ask, if there is a clone, then there cannot be a soul, but that is a lack of knowledge about the Bhagavad Gita. The ocean of infinite intelligence, the source of this universe, Shri Krishna Govinda, expresses infinite power. And part of God's power manifests itself as the eternal production of countless souls, infinite living entities that play the role of all beings in this universe. Even if the universe is manipulated, cloned, counterfeited, this is already predicted for this age of Kali, and it's widely described in the Vedic literature, as our students already know. But if God exists, why do we face so many problems? In a few moments, we will talk about it. Environmental crisis can lead to a greater awareness of organic food and vegetarianism, choices that stimulate compassion and kindness. Animals are our brothers. The torture and slaughter of animals will bring heavy karma to humanity. And karma is the basis of the problems we are facing now. In 2022, ecology will come to the front. Food production will change too. People will start to plant more of their own food. We will see community gardens emerging, even in public spaces or condominium gardens. An idea that can help solve the crisis linked to inflation and food transport. We will be forced to take better care of the environment to try to stop natural calamities. So, as we have said, in the future we will face extremisms, The people who piously believe in the media and television versus those who doubt about it. In fact, this is one of the secrets of this pandemic. The Supreme God is testing our convictions. One might say, through deaths and cruelty, God tests us. So God is not good. Well, Krishna explains in the Gita that the soul never dies, as it is eternal. So what seems to us a tragedy is sometimes simply a sudden change of material form. God is looking at us to see who do we believe can help us understand what spirituality truly is. Anyway, from April 2022, we can consider the conjunction between Jupiter and Neptune in the sign of Pisces as something very important, because Jupiter transforms the reality. It marks the end of ages and the beginning of other phases. 2022 contains a positive factor. We will feel the blessings of the spiritual master, Shri Jupiter, or rather, Shri Guru in Sanskrit. Jupiter will enter a favorable constellation, and we will have changes in the area of education and virtual reality, as we explained in the video about 2021. Today we talk about disruption and a paradigm shift in the education system. Changes in the education system intend to change all parameters, optimize the study routine, functionality, moving towards learning through experience, which means less theory and more practice. However, the negative aspect of these changes in the education system has been neglected. The great lesson of the school is the direct relationship between the teacher and the students. The figure of the teacher shows the student practical empathy, which is different from family and friends. What happens in a relationship between teacher and student is a heart-to-heart contact with one another. Online schools will lack of such aspect. It will sterilize the direct and personal contact between the teacher and the children. And this will have a strong consequence for society in the future. In the name of the sacredness of youth, facilitation techniques at school will be encouraged, which can make the school experience more superficial and impoverished. Attention, please. The disrespect of Western society regarding teachers are the mark of anti-Vedic thinking. As in ancient India, teachers were seen as the highest level of the social pyramid, above governors and kings. The advance of this tendency, due to the lack of discipline of young people, would generate strikes and discontent among teachers. And this should be avoided for the good future of humanity. Adults that refrain from instructing and correcting their children at the same time become hostages of spoiled kids. In order not to suffer at the hands of small tyrants, parents are against teachers who try to correct their children. But be careful. Firmness, rules, teach young people to have discipline. And discipline is the main ingredient for prosperity and future happiness. Always remember that karma is an astrological aspect that competes with our free will, that competes with our personal choices, and with Vastu, the environment where we are. Each of these three forces counts as 1/3 of what influences reality, as we said in past videos. So our actions delay or anticipate certain results. In fact, astrology and prophecy exist for us to seek God and not to spoil the surprise of life, as if it were a movie of which we read the entire plot. But why there is evil, and why do we suffer? We should never think that good and evil, pleasure and suffering are the same things. Of course not. Evil and suffering show us where we went wrong and what we should not repeat. Such contrast of positive and negative exists to teach us what is good and what is bad, what is favorable and what is unfavorable. This is the universal programming within the material cosmos, within the infinite intelligence, to differentiate what to do and what not to do. God creates this contrast and gives us free will for us to learn to distinguish and choose. The infinite God tests us. He watches us and uses good and evil to make us mature and evolve. Why do we suffer? Why is there ignorance? Astrologers and spiritualists often forget that planets are part of Maya's theater of illusion, and above all, that Kali Yuga is governed by an immutable law, the entropy. In 2022, we will plant the seeds of great transformation, which will occur from 2023 on. From that year, we will have a little more balance and economic improvement. From the second half of 2023, Jupiter will finally give us some peace. But that is a subject for the next video. Now we invite everyone to watch our other classes and proceed step by step towards more scientific and philosophical knowledge about existence. Anyone who wishes can contribute to our efforts by making a donation or use this Brazilian number plus 55 11 9 470 63354 to schedule an astrological consultation or buy books on Indian philosophy with us and help us in this way. Because the Eternal Vedic Science is a philanthropic study group that could produce more content and generates greater benefit to society if we had the support of all of you. Once again, we thank everyone for your trust and attention. We give our respects to the great spiritual masters of millennial India who brought us God, Krishna, and a blessed perspective on this turbulent time in material reality. Hari Bol, Jai Gurudev.